As we look ahead to tomorrow and back at the what ifs, the dangerously close calls 1 year ago that would determine whether our vulnerable, fragile democracy would make it or if the big lie would prevail, we're left with the disastrous consequences of those lies a year later. Among them, a nation heavily divided over what was and is at stake. A new poll from USA Today and Suffolk University finds that while the majority of both Democrats and Republicans are worried that democracy is in peril, they disagree on why that is. Only 53% say January 6th was a protest aimed at overturning a legitimate election, including 85% of Democrats. Meanwhile, more than half of Republicans still think it was this, quote, a protest aimed at preventing a fraudulent election. And on the Select Committee's investigation into that day, 88% of Democrats say it's important for the future of our democracy. A whopping 78% of Republicans say it's a waste of time. Joining our conversation is MSNBC political analyst, former Republican Congressman David Jolly, also Kimberly Atkins-Storrs, senior opinion columnist for the Boston Globe, and MSNBC contributor. Michael Steele, of course, is still here. Kim, what are you thinking about as you look ahead to tomorrow?
Yeah, it's amazing that 1 year out, watching that in real time a year ago, I would think that that was the floor. We saw a lot of things happening, a lot of division, a lot of falsehoods being lodged. But I thought, oh, my goodness, this attack on the seat of democracy in America would finally be the floor that would wake Americans up and would make them realize how delicate our democracy is. Remember, democracy isn't a state of being. It's an act, and it's very fragile. And we saw it there. So to be a year out and to still have this, so many Americans not recognizing exactly what it was is really disappointing. It makes you realize how even more fragile it is. A couple days ago, Michael Beschloss said that 2022 might be the year that democracy in America fails. And that's something that I've been thinking about ever since. And if it does fail, we won't be able to get it back so easily. I hope more Americans come to realize that.
David Jolly, when I was coming on to anchor that day, I came on early and I stayed on late, but when they asked me to go on, I remember thinking, I don't know what I'm covering yet. I don't know what this is. What is this? Is this a security story? Is this a political story? And someone said to me, cover it like a national security story because that building is not secure. And so I reached out to a former CIA official, a former national security advisor, and a former Pentagon official, all who had worked for Republican presidents, Republican administrations. And they said, I think I went on the air around 3. They said in that moment that the only people who can stop this are people from inside the movement. This is going to be a counter-extremism effort from this day forward. There is nothing you can say to your audience of people that will see it as it is that will make this not happen again. And it is not clear to me that anyone has engaged in a counter-extremism effort, is it?
Look, there are voices that are pushing back, and you are one of those, Nicole, in your reporting. And I think Merrick Garland's Department of Justice has prosecuted over 700 cases or filed charges over 700 cases. But do we see the volume of voices on both sides of the aisle, regardless of partisan allegiances, push back on this? No. And I do think that's the danger. I think it is more likely than not that the events of January 6, 2021 will happen again. And to your point, covering it in real time, we had to recognize it as a national security moment. One of the fundamental pillars of our republic almost broke that day, meaning the peaceful transfer of a certified election or the peaceful certification of an election. And that can happen again because the voices, frankly, on one side of the political aisle continue to deny the reality that Donald Trump is dangerous to the nation. And I think for me, that's my takeaway going into tomorrow. The optimist in me says that America is a resilient experiment, that the republic survived last January 6th and ultimately on January 20th. And so we want to talk about the strength of the republic, but the reality is what contributed to the events of last year still exist in our American culture today, and it is more likely than not that we will have to face that moment again in the future.